Fun little fact, I can't hear the music, so I don't know whether or not this dance is probably not to the rhythm. I know the music's playing. I can see the sound bars. I don't have headphones. I don't have jack in, because this is what I do. This is what I do. That doesn't make any sense. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Snow, and I really just hope that's enough. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. Does 2 make a series? Part 2 of a part 2 thing. 2 parts. That's not worth calling a series. I don't know. Can a series have 2 parts is the question. Put your answer in the comments. I'm sure everyone will be polite. Jimmy Snow's such an idiot. He doesn't even know that a series definition is... How did he get this far in life? If you haven't watched already the video which details all of the cases facing Donald Trump, a link can be found in the description to part 1, which lays out in a much more informational way, though a reminder, it is me. I am who I am. And yes, I couldn't resist in some of those cases, giving it a little bit of a little bit extra. More than you bargained for, folks. It is more than you bargained for. Also, before we begin, don't miss the return of the Sometime Show this Sunday evening into every Tuesday and Thursday in the months that follow, leading up to the election of 2024. So let's talk about it. Why are we here? What are we doing? What's the meaning of the universe? I don't have answers to that one, but why we're here today to talk about that? It's Donald Trump. And it is not enough to just say that Donald Trump has a ton of cases against him. Technically, allegations alone are not evidence, and the legal system has to operate on a presumption of innocence until proven guilty. But you know who I am? Jimmy Snow. You know who I'm not? The legal citizen. I'm not the legal system. I'm a private citizen, capable of evaluating evidence and information on a much different timescale than the courts, and coming to conclusions, though I do try to make sure I do so reasonably and in a way that can change when new information is introduced. It's also worth noting that a court finding a defendant guilty or not guilty does not actually affect what moral conclusions a person may independently come to, or actually indicate whether that guy is in fact guilty or not guilty. Maybe you remember the famous case of O.J. Simpson, a man so obviously guilty but protected by double jeopardy laws that he actually had the audacity to write a book called If I Did It. Well, that sure leaves it up in the air. If I did, here's how I do it if I did it. Perfect O.J. Simpson impression. I don't even know what he sounds like. Cannot remember. Anyway, it's with similar confidence that I declare to you that not only is O.J. Simpson a disgusting murderer, I would say that the evidence we now see regarding Donald Trump and his many deeds of fraud and insurrection point to a similar conclusion. The dude is guilty. Maybe not of murder, but I'm only saying maybe on that. He just seems like the kind... This guy's had someone whacked. Can we all agree? Look, I'm not telling you what you should do, but if I should leave $50,000 on the table and it was gone, and subsequently a certain problem was gone, then would it be so bad if Jimmy Snow no longer was a problem because I watch his YouTube channel religiously, which is a little ironic because he's not religious. He says he's not religious, and we are not people who like a non-religious guy. No, we are not. We do not. Well, I'm going to do more of that during the show, almost certainly. So the question is now, will the courts agree? And I'm here with some wonderful news. My friends, it would appear, I think they're gonna. I really think that. Guys, come here. I think they're gonna. I think Donald Trump... Look, I'm going to go in the same order. I'm going to go case by case on what I believe is going to happen, as well as share some very significant developments in some of the cases, and why Donald Trump has already been found guilty in some ways, and what it indicates for the cases to follow. But if a single sentence summary is adequate for you, I'll just get it out of the way. I might even make it something like the title of the episode. If this is all you want, I'll just tell you. Donald Trump, the man, the myth, the reality star, the twice impeached disgraced ex-president, that guy, that Donald Trump, not any of the other ones, that dude's going down. I think. I really do. In part 1, we started with the Manhattan criminal case, which alleges fraud from Trump surrounding the payments to Stormy Daniels. This was the very first case in series of indictments issued for Trump, and to be honest, it is the one that is unlikely to return much. I'm starting with the ones, let's get your hopes up later in the show. I'm gonna tear you down now, and then I'm gonna build you back up. Come on up, my babies. Donald Trump has already cluster-fucked the entire country, and there isn't much interest in how much he paid other people to consensually fuck him. When it comes to fraudulently moving money around and operating through shells, sure, that's obviously all wrong. Sounds like fraud, but it's hard to conceive of him getting any kind of significant punishment from it. At the end of the day, he might be looking at fines. And if it does succeed, and this is one of the ones that has the biggest if, I don't think fines are going to slow this man down. If anything, he'll use it to fraudulently fundraise more. A lot of alliteration in this episode already, and there's going to be more to come. Not intentionally, I just suspect that to be the case. Additionally, there have been some who have suggested that it would be better to drop this case so the timelines of the other cases aren't delayed to fit this one in. And to tell you the truth, I get that argument. It is unfortunately important that all of these cases happen before the next election, so it may be the case that this is the one that should be let go of. But at this point, I doubt it's going to happen. I will say if this case is lost, it's going to very negatively affect things. The perception overall, as very ridiculous people will use it as proof to very gullible people that total witch hunt, this was a witch hunt, total witch hunt. And they say nobody has ever been treated worse in a witch hunt than me. The Donald Trump, this is the worst type of witch hunt that's ever happened in history, ever, anywhere, including Salem. But there is a side of me that also says that we have to try because it really looks like he did what was alleged and justice is justice. And it's kind of that simple. And few things are worse than not at least trying to achieve justice. But the question here being is one of the things that isn't worse other justice getting pushed around and then he becomes president. And look, I don't want to be depressing, but I don't have a ton of hope in this case. And I don't have a ton of hope in the second case either. The case in Colorado, that's the wrong one, to try and disqualify Donald Trump from being on the ticket in 2024. I'm glad they're doing it, and I fully believe he is technically disqualified by the 14th Amendment. I think that it does apply to him. But when you consider the guilty verdicts for, this isn't a but, when you consider the guilty verdicts for insurrection that people from that day have received, it seems pretty friggin' clear to me that January 6th has officially been accepted by legal practitioners as an insurrection. It's in the record now. So now the determination has to be whether Trump himself participated in the insurrection, which I think he absolutely did. Or, as the amendment lists out, if he gave aid or comfort to the participants. I think that latter one is even more obvious and has happened in his speeches where he's indicated that he would be pardoning many of these convicted insurrectionists. But it's hard to believe this will succeed, even if it does legally on appeals. Even if it does succeed, appeals make their way up into the federal courts, and I cannot see those courts holding it up afterwards. Much of this simply because it would be such a huge, unprecedented thing to happen. Again, I don't agree that should stop it, but I am aware of how the weight of things can affect outcomes. And even if we weren't in a radical conservative court, which we are, so that further lessens the odds, even if we weren't, you could see a court of actually constitutional judges, say a split court or even a mostly liberal court, saying, unfortunately, the ask is too big. Because remember, as far as things go, Donald Trump could actually still be elected even if he was in prison. So the U.S. likes to pretend anybody can be president. That is very interested in maintaining this farce of democratic elections, truly democratic elections, even as we use a system as antiquated as the Electoral College system. So democratic. Now, it's also the case that it would be better to defeat him at the ballot, and that's always going to be true. It would also be great if people would see through his charlatan persona, but there's no guarantee of those things happening. So while I do once again have low hopes, I have high hopes that my low hopes are wrong. It's hopeception. Coming to a movie theater in, let's say, 2028. Just kidding. We'll all be dead for 2 years by then. That seems like, yeah, that makes sense. It's the nukes, baby. They're coming. What we're going to do is nuke climate change. We're going to send a nuclear bomb into the climate, and that's going to fix everything. We do know, despite his best efforts, Trump has failed to get it thrown out, the case, on the merits, and that might be a good sign, but also, and this is true, it could be a sign of nothing. So I'm sorry for the first two to be downers, but it was just those two. From here on, it gets pretty good. Let's proceed. Next, you're going to remember the civil fraud trial in New York, and the judge has actually already declared that Trump is guilty of the fraud he is accused of. Just a summary judgment. Boom, you're guilty, boy. The only question now is how deep does it go and how many consequences can be reasonably imposed. For the moment, Trump has already lost licenses for his New York businesses, causing a huge hit to his wallet and reducing his ongoing ability to enrich himself and his family. One of those things matters very much to him. But wait, there's more. This is also the case you can see that Trump has become the most unhinged over. He is currently having to sit in hearings and has at least once already stormed out while his old lawyer, Michael Cohen, trust me, hey, guy, I'm going to take care of things, huh? We'll get this taken care of under the table, no problem. Michael Cohen, I'm glad he turned witness, but what a creep that guy is. Anyway, he stormed out while Michael Cohen was testifying, but also he's now violated a gag order twice because the judge has said to him, Trump, you can say anything about me, but do not attack court officials. Do not attack the people who are working here. Do not attack witnesses, whether that's social media, news media, whatever. And this guy can't stop. At one point, breaking the gag order during the hearing, going out and breaking the gag order to reporters waiting outside. And Trump is unable to just keep his mouth shut. And so he's broken the order now twice, fined up to $15,000, I think it was so far, $5,000 the first time, $10,000 the second. And the judge also recently reminded him that if he keeps this shit up, he's got the option to imprison Trump. And with that in mind, I think I can speak for all of us when I say, Trump, he's bluffing. The judge is bluffing. Do it. Keep breaking it, you friggin' loser. I mean, winner. I'm so tired of winning. It's time to break these gag orders. Break the gag orders. This hearing may result in a total ban on Trump doing business in the state of New York and up to $250 million in fines. And Trump is more recently melting down over the ruling from the judge that Ivanka is indeed going to have to comply with subpoenas and testify at the hearings. And considering recent questions about their relationships and her loyalty, with it fluctuating up and down since he lost the last election, I can see this being something he is sweating really hard. Who do I love more, Ivanka or me? This is tough. It's a tough one. It's hard. Hey, is there a loophole? Let's think about this. This is some of that genius stuff that, frankly, is there a loophole in which I could marry Ivanka and then she doesn't have to testify against me? Let's find that. Let's find out. And let's just do that. And now, I feel like he's not above that. I don't feel like that's, I was watching this YouTube channel the other day, and frankly, he had a killer idea. He was making fun of me, but he had a killer idea. What we want to do is get Ivanka. But now let's get to the really, really good stuff. And from here, it gets good and then it gets better. So remember, Jack Smith has indicted Trump on multiple accounts in two different cases and in two different courts. You have the case, I just had to swallow some, but we're one taking this shit. You've got the case of him trying to overturn the election and deny people their civil rights, as well as the classified documents case, which has been expanded into areas of obstruction. And from the onset of these cases, one of the things that's been on everyone's mind is who, if anybody, is going to flip. And if Trump did the things he's alleged to have done, that requires a lot of people to pull off, a lot of potential flippers. People who won't be as confident as Trump that they're going to just get off scot-free. And in the case in Florida regarding classified documents, that's where we got the first case to deliver such a witness since Michael Cohen, anyway, who had flipped back during congressional hearings during Trump's presidency. Anyway, specifically, it was a guy from Mar-a-Lago. You don't know who he is. You probably never heard of him. So I'm not going to shame this guy for falling for such obvious charisma. Specifically the director of information technologies, who had previously testified that he was unaware of any attempt to tamper with security footage. That man actually agreed to turn against Trump after he changed lawyers, because before he had a lawyer that was being paid for by Trump's PAC and not advocating basically for his best well-being, more advocating for Trump's well-being. And afterwards, he changed his testimony to indicate that indeed he had participated in this sort of conspiracy to try and delete security footage. Now, while this is a very encouraging development, It's also worth noting that the judge in this case is a person who from the onset has not been trusted to be nonpartisan and is someone who's even been reprimanded in the past for not following normal court procedures when favoring Donald Trump. In fact, she had previously halted the investigation into Donald Trump's handling of classified documents even before she was actually the judge on his case. And ultimately, a conservative appeals court, did you hear that? Did you hear the words I just said? That the appeals court was conservative? Sorry about any of those extra sounds. The appeals court was conservative. A conservative appeals court said, ha, 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 stop. You have to stop. And so, look, I'm not going to make any specific claims about her capabilities, her as a person, but I'm going to say I'm concerned and I'm curious and I'm at least a little bit worried about some of the things that have happened so far that she's been involved in. I don't believe that just because she's a Trump-appointed judge that she's incapable of being impartial. That's been fine in some other cases. The guy in Georgia seems fine, and he's like my age. Isn't that weird? The judge is like, we're like not far off in age from each other. How odd is that? Anyway, the judge in Georgia, he's fine. I mean, he's conservative, so he's not fine, but for the case, he seems like he's fine. I'm just saying, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not concerned at all about that judge. But moving on from that, then we look at the case. Again, that's not the right thing to do. We look at the case regarding Trump. All we did was remove the Florida shadow because it's not Florida now. We look at the case regarding Trump's involvement in January 6th and his attempt to overturn the election, which he knew he lost. And that's where things get much, shall we say, spicier. That's a spicy meatball. There's less to say, but the thing that there is to share is pretty big. And that is that I should have had a graphic ready to right now go to Mark Meadows, but I don't. Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff. I'm a fraud. Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, has been granted immunity to testify against Donald Trump and oh, wow. I wouldn't even be able to keep delivering it that way, much less ask anybody to keep listening. Yeah, Mark Meadows now has immunity to testify against Donald Trump. And that's perhaps the most significant person who could do that. You don't really get closer to the president than the chief of staff. This is the person setting up the calls, monitoring the calls, and maintaining the agenda for each day. And clearly, from the things we know just regarding like leaks of text messages from January 6th, while Mark Meadows is absolutely a Republican sycophant, even he knew that on that day, things weren't fine, that it wasn't cool. We also know that the Trump team has been very concerned about what sort of things Mark Meadows could be saying, and while he hasn't been entirely silent on the issue, Donald Trump is clearly watching his ass and not saying too much to completely besmirch Mark Meadows until he knows just how far Meadows has gone. And it's hard to not laugh a little when you hear about stressed out Donnie, old Donnie boy, not having a good time behind the scenes. And that he's really worried about the fact that he's not been able to contact his old puppet and potentially manipulate Mark Meadows. But there is still more great stuff to come. We absolutely have to remember Georgia, where Donald Trump is accused of trying to overturn and interfere with the election in that state. And that case involves several more defendants as it is being tried as a RICO case. In other words, they're being treated like a crime family. I made his frown more frowny. Looks like a butt. Or rather, it is being treated like a conspiracy made up of several people in an organized criminal way, like a crime family, with old Don the Don. Donnie the Don. Hey, Don. Hello. One of the most beautiful ironies being that Rudy Giuliani is the second defendant in this case, and Rudy kind of made his career trying RICO cases. It's the thing for which he is probably the most famous. The third defendant, you may remember as the absolute whack job she is, Sidney Powell, who led legal efforts to overturn the election on the basis of radical conspiracies, one of which she got. Y'all aren't ready for this. It's just I just sort of wrote it. It's just sort of in the teleprompter. And I didn't really put enough into thinking about how you're not ready for this. Y'all ready for this? Da-da-da-da. Okay, we'll try. I'm gonna scroll back up. I shouldn't even be indicating that I'm using a teleprompter, but I did write all of this. It's not like someone else wrote it for me. Not this time. The third defendant. This is going great. The third defendant you may remember as the absolute whack job she is, Sidney Powell, who led legal efforts to overturn the election on the basis of radical conspiracies, some of which she got from emails from a person claiming to be a decapitated time traveler. In other emails, she indicated she is a ghost, but that she doesn't believe she's a ghost. She thinks she's just a decapitated time traveler, but that others call her a ghost. And Fox News still put Sidney Powell onto their air after that had happened and after they were aware of those emails, as she had actually forwarded those emails to staff at Fox News, including at least one of the hosts. In fact, they didn't just still have her on, they still let her present the claims from Space Ghost. And Sidney Powell, who was a major part of Donald Trump's legal team pursuing efforts to delay or overturn the elections and decertify votes, is number 3. This is a big get. And she will now, well, we'll get there. You remember her. Let's just remember her. And then let's remember Kenneth Chesebro, another indicted co-conspirator. This person, also a lawyer, led the fake elector scheme, an attempt to delay or overturn the counting of the votes by sending false representatives to Washington to cast the votes for the Electoral College. Let's remember him. Let's also remember Jenna Ellis, who creepily smiled like this while having her mugshot taken. Nailed it. Don't forget about Jenna Ellis, who was another lawyer who aided Giuliani in his schemes, who was just also a big part of crafting these narratives. So that's who we have. Jenna Ellis, Giuliani, Powell, and Chesebro. But these 3, who created false evidence and narratives and attempted to overturn the 2020 election, these 3, this is where it's gotten so damn fun for me. Another thing you're not ready for. Of the 4 lawyers total, these 3, the latter 3, everyone except Giuliani, have now pled guilty and as a part of their plea deal have agreed to turn witness against Trump and Giuliani. Ellis in particular may be especially capable of raining on Giuliani's parade. And as each day goes by, things are looking worse and worse for the former president. It may be that he now thinks his only way out of this is to win an election and then pardon himself. But remember, despite the fact that we all know he would try if he can, we don't actually know that a president can pardon himself. It's never been tested, and there is nothing to indicate that that was ever the intention of any of the past legal precedent. If a president is capable of pardoning himself, then the old adage that no one is above the law would be demonstrably untrue. However, we do right now live under a radical right-wing Supreme Court, and there's no way to know for sure how they would vote. I think we do know that at least 2 of them would certainly vote in the president's favor, but it's conceivable that it would only be those 2. And I'm not going to pretend to be unbiased myself. Clearly, I'm getting joy out of this because I think Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to the country and the world. So yes, I want justice to be served because that's the right thing to do. But also, I just want the man to suffer a little. I just want a little revenge, but mostly justice. But revenge, but justice. Revenge a little. I want this man to finally be put in his place. But I also want to see the eventual disillusionment of what is hopefully all, but I'd settle for most of his followers. Truly, I want them to be able to have the same experience I had when I realized that Mormonism wasn't everything I had believed it to be. Talking about that liberation that comes when you break free of an abusive or manipulative relationship, cult, group, community, whatever. But at this point, I don't know what it would take. These people, his supporters, may think of him as some sort of political martyr if he goes to prison. and might take that belief all the way to their grave. But I'm going to hope for something better. I'm going to hope for something beautiful. I'm going to hope for Calvin Klein. No, I don't know where some of these things come from. Calvin Klein, give me money. I just did that for no reason. Now, speaking of him going to prison, that's the thing that I am least confident is going to happen. I do wear Calvin Klein underwear sometimes, for the record. I am not confident he's going to prison, even as he's found guilty in many of these areas. It seems to me not unlikely that whoever would be president, assuming that it isn't Donald Trump, on the left or the right, would end up at least commuting his sentence, if not all out pardoning it. And I would extend that to the governor of Georgia, even the one who he has been so garbage to. Though if it was the current governor, I would think it would be a commuting of sentence. And if it's a different governor, also Republican, pardoning. Probably what's going to happen. And yes, I actually even think Joe Biden and many other conceivable American left candidates would commute his sentence and talk about how important it is for the country to move on. We've got to move on. I'm serious. Not a joke. And ultimately, that will be extremely unsatisfactory and frustrating and piss a lot of people off, including myself, even as I would be able to understand at its core what was happening and why, because a lot of conceivable alternatives are real goddamn scary. Oh, so if Donald Trump did win the presidency and was actively serving a prison sentence at that time, or a prison sentence was issued after he became president, we really don't know what to do. There's no precedent for that. How would we proceed? Even if he can't pardon himself, would there be anything preventing him from, say, activating the vice president as president on a temporary basis? You know, like Bush used to have to do when he would go under during his term, when he would have medical procedures. I remember a colonoscopy. That's the last time I remember the vice president became president. Dick Cheney was president for a while because I think George Bush had a colonoscopy. Maybe also when he choked on that pretzel. Anyway, at that point, could the vice president, acting as the president, pardon Trump? I don't know. I genuinely have no idea. But I don't see a lot of futures where Donald Trump is actually being held actively in prison. I really don't. Now, if he continues to ignore his gag orders, it could be that it happens on a temporary basis, more jail than prison, and maybe that's all we're going to get to have. And if that is the case, when it comes round, I'm going to savor it, baby. Like sweet sauce on my supple lips. It's been a long day. Anyway, I'm going to savor that moment when it occurs. But in closing, I want to say this. Obviously, I can be wrong. It has been known to happen. Can't think of a single time, but it's been known to happen. That's a joke. Calm the fuck down. Something really funny has just happened, and I have to share it. I put some final notes on this right before right before it was time to record. And I was using dictation, and I accidentally didn't stop dictating. And so there's a bunch of stuff of me telling somebody about taking a shower before there's a whole bunch. Okay. Anyway, it seems to me, this is what I want to say in closing. I should cut that out, but I'm not gonna. It seems to me that Donald Trump's chickens may have finally come home to roost, or will be coming home to roost. And while it frustrates me that true justice will never be achieved and he will probably not spend any significant period of time in prison or jail, it's going to be nice to have as an official record of history that after some years, America finally started responding to one of the most consequential charlatans of a president that we have ever had. Those are my final thoughts. Totally devoid of my plans to shower and hand out candy tonight. Those are separate things. Basically, I was talking to somebody about how little time I have. So I need to shower now, record stuff, and then do the live show with Dave, and then hand out candy. I'm recording this on Halloween. Don't tell anyone. Who knows what day this will come out? Who knows what year? Anyway, hit buttons, write comments, do things, and I'll see you this Sunday for a special episode of the Sometime Show. I'm Jimmy Snow. This exists now. That's what this was. Existence. Thanks for watching. And as always, I suppose we fade to black. Blue. Paka. Should just do it now. Call somebody and talk about, yeah, I gotta take a shower. I got nerds, and I got crunch bars, I got Milky Ways. We handed them out for children today. My neighborhood gets so many trick-or-treaters. It's actually kind of cool. All right. I'm going to go potty now. Bye. That was potty, not party.